Have you ever entered a place that looked ordinary, yet something deep inside whispered, "Leave now"? Rudolf Steiner said such feelings are not imagination, but perception, our soul reacting to the invisible forces woven into every environment. For behind the walls of every building, behind the soil, the sound, even the air itself, lies a moral and spiritual atmosphere. Steiner taught that the world is a living being. Every thought, every action, every emotion humans pour into a space leaves a trace, a vibration that either nourishes or poisons the soul. That is why you can step into a quiet forest and feel healed within minutes, or enter a crowded, glittering room and feel suddenly empty. The difference is not only in what you see, but in what you breathe with your spirit. Most people ignore this invisible weather. They think fatigue, confusion, or sudden sadness are random. But Steiner warned that the soul can be poisoned just as surely as the body, by places heavy with greed, deceit, or despair. Recognizing these atmospheres is not superstition. It is spiritual hygiene. In this journey, we will uncover 7 kinds of places that slowly drain the human spirit, 7 subtle landscapes where the light of consciousness fades. Knowing them is the first step to freedom, for when you see what feeds and what weakens your inner fire, you begin to walk through the world with awakened eyes. The first place Steiner warned of is where life has been exploited, where human will has turned the living earth into a lifeless machine. He spoke of the Ahrimanic influence, that cold, mechanical spirit which hardens matter and numbs the human heart. When we step into certain environments, vast factories without windows, offices filled with the hum of fluorescent light, or even modern farms where animals never see the sun, we are entering a field where this influence reigns. It is not only the work done there that wounds the soul, but the intention behind it. In such places, everything is measured, owned, and sold. The rhythm of life is replaced by the rhythm of profit. The air carries a kind of invisible fatigue. Steiner described this as dead ether, a force that once belonged to life, now crystallized into spiritual stone. Have you ever left a building and felt as though part of your spirit stayed behind, trapped among the walls? That is how Ahrimanic places work. They feed on human attention, but return nothing alive. Imagine walking through an abandoned industrial zone. The metal rusts, but the energy still lingers. A memory of years of repetition, of hands moving without joy. The ground seems to sigh beneath your feet. Even if the machines are silent, something continues to hum, a residue of purpose severed from meaning. The danger of such places is not just exhaustion, it is transformation. Stay too long, and you begin to think like the place itself. Efficient, precise, but stripped of tenderness. Compassion feels inconvenient. Imagination becomes luxury. Your mind tightens, your breath shortens, and life becomes a schedule. The Ahrimanic spirit whispers, "Be productive, not alive." Steiner urged that we recognize this poison not to condemn work, but to sanctify it. He believed any place could be redeemed if human beings bring consciousness back into it, through reverence, beauty, and rhythm. A worker who blesses their work, who moves with awareness, can turn even a mechanical task into an act of devotion. But when intention dies, the place itself begins to rot inwardly, and those who dwell there slowly absorb that decay. To cleanse after visiting or working in such environments, Steiner suggested reconnecting with living nature. Touch wood, soil, or water. Breathe with trees. Let the heart remember the pulse of creation. Only then can the soul recover its elasticity. So, when you next find yourself in a place that feels heavy, pause and listen. Does your breath shorten? Does your warmth fade? The building may seem harmless, yet your inner being will always tell the truth. This place takes more than it gives. The second kind of place Steiner warned about is where false entertainment reigns. the modern temples of distraction. They shimmer with light, sound, and promise. Shopping malls glowing under artificial suns, casinos without clocks, or even the endless corridors of digital worlds where millions wander aimlessly. On the surface, they seem full of life. But beneath that glitter pulses a hollow current, a luciferic glamour that blinds rather than enlightens. Steiner explained that the luciferic force does not always appear as darkness. Often, it masquerades as too much light, too much fascination, too much stimulation. These are the places where the human soul forgets itself, seduced by sensation and illusion. The laughter there is loud but empty, like wind blowing through a hollow shell. Have you noticed how time disappears in such places? You enter for a moment and awaken hours later. Drained, dazed, your will dispersed like dust. In ancient temples, light was used to reveal truth. In these new temples, light hides it. The music, the screens, the constant motion, all are designed to fill the inner silence where the higher self might speak. When everything sparkles, nothing truly shines. Steiner called this the false light, for it lifts the soul upward, but away from the real world, away from responsibility, toward a feverish mirage of pleasure. You might recognize it in yourself, the rush of scrolling endlessly on a phone, the quick pulse of excitement when buying something unnecessary, the strange sadness that follows soon after. That sadness is your soul remembering its hunger for something real. The luciferic atmosphere feeds on that hunger. It gives you light without warmth, excitement without depth. Yet Steiner never said we must flee from joy or beauty. The difference lies in consciousness. Real joy leaves the soul glowing gently, calm, and alive. False joy burns bright and then leaves ashes. The question is simple but profound. Does this place return me to myself, or does it make me forget who I am? When we begin to notice how many of our modern environments, physical and virtual, are crafted to make us forget, we awaken a sacred responsibility to protect the still point within. Turn off the sound for a moment, look around, and feel. If your heart suddenly feels silent, if you sense a film of weariness around your aura, that is your spirit whispering. This light is not nourishment. It is intoxication. Steiner's remedy was clarity. He advised conscious withdrawal, periods of quiet, of simplicity, of looking at a living flame or gazing at the stars to remember what true light feels like. In doing so, we cleanse the illusions that cling to our senses and return to the quiet radiance of the soul itself. The third kind of place Steiner spoke of is where hatred and fear gather, where human emotion has condensed into a dark, lingering cloud. Such places may not look threatening. They might even seem ordinary. Yet when you enter them, the atmosphere feels heavy, as if the air itself has memory. These are sites where suffering, anger, or violence has been repeated again and again until it has taken on a kind of spiritual form, a collective being woven out of pain. Steiner described how thoughts and emotions do not vanish when unspoken. They remain in the etheric and astral layers of the world, shaping invisible thought forms. When these forces combine, they create what he called egregores, energetic entities that continue to feed on the emotions that birthed them. A room where people constantly argue, a street marked by crime, an old battlefield, or even an online space full of rage, all become hosts to these invisible parasites of the soul. Have you ever noticed how your own thoughts change in such places? You might arrive calm, yet soon you feel irritated for no clear reason. Your breathing shortens, your tone sharpens, your sense of compassion dims. That is not just mood, it is resonance. Your own inner field begins to vibrate with the dominant note of the place. Steiner compared this to tuning forks. One begins to hum when the other is struck. The more sensitive a soul is, the more it feels these echoes. He also warned that such atmospheres can become addictive. Anger carries energy, and when the ego is weak, it seeks that energy as a false form of vitality. That is why people are drawn to conflict zones, whether physical or virtual, as if to feed on the storm. But what they do not realize is that every time they engage in it, they leave behind a fragment of their own light. If you sense that you have walked through such a place, do not panic. The soul can always cleanse itself. Steiner suggested stillness and remembrance of love as the antidote. Light and warmth dissolve darkness. Prayer, meditation, or even gentle breathing in nature restores harmony. He once said that the simplest act, holding a compassionate thought toward those who suffer, sends out a current that disperses the shadow. Imagine for a moment an abandoned prison where cruelty once ruled. The walls are silent, yet the energy trembles. Now, picture someone walking through that same corridor with a quiet heart, offering forgiveness to the forgotten souls who suffered there. Slowly, the atmosphere shifts. The darkness, confronted not with fear, but with love, begins to thin. This is the alchemy Steiner meant, the transformation of a place through conscious presence. When we carry peace within us, we become healers of the world's wounded spaces. The task is not to avoid them forever, but to learn how to stand within them as a quiet sun, radiating balance. The more we learn to listen to the vibrations of a place, the less likely we are to mistake the world's pain for our own. The fourth kind of place Steiner urged us to recognize is where nature has been silenced. These are landscapes where the elemental beings, the invisible builders of life, have withdrawn because human activity has stripped them of reverence. You can sense it immediately. A city intersection where the air trembles with noise, but no bird sings. A river that smells of metal instead of moss. A field once green, now gray under concrete. On the surface, these places seem alive with movement, but inwardly they are barren. Steiner taught that every part of nature is inhabited by conscious forces. The gnomes of the earth, the undines of water, the sylphs of air, the salamanders of fire. They are not fairy tales, but spiritual realities, maintaining the harmony between the physical and etheric worlds. When humanity forgets gratitude, these beings retreat. What remains is the echo of their absence, a strange, heavy stillness that the modern soul interprets as loneliness. Have you ever felt that in a lifeless suburb, where every tree stands planted, but not alive, trimmed into silence, its roots strangled by pipes? You might walk there and feel an ache that has no name. That ache, Steiner would say, is the soul mourning its lost dialogue with the earth. We are spiritual exiles in a world we ourselves have dissolved. This loss has consequences far beyond aesthetics. When we spend too long in places devoid of elemental vitality, our inner life begins to mimic them. Creativity fades, intuition dries, and dreams lose their color. The heart, which once pulsed in rhythm with rain and wind, begins to beat mechanically. The result is a subtle despair, the sense that life has become artificial. Steiner did not call us to nostalgia, but to participation. Nature does not need worship, it needs recognition. Even in a polluted city, he said, a single human being who looks upon a flower with love restores a line of communication to the invisible worlds. The elements listen. The earth breathes again through that act of reverence. Try this. Next time you walk through a lifeless place, look for one sign of life. A weed breaking through pavement, a cloud shifting shape, a patch of sky between cables. Greet it inwardly. That moment of recognition sends a current through the spiritual ether, and something subtle changes. You begin to sense the quiet endurance of nature, waiting for us to remember her voice. Steiner believed that one of the greatest tasks of our age is to reawaken this conversation. Only then can we heal not just the planet, but ourselves. For when nature is silent, the soul forgets how to sing. But when we listen again, both are restored to harmony. The fifth kind of place that poisons the soul, Steiner said, is where people wear masks of deception, environments soaked in falsehood, manipulation, and subtle betrayal of truth. These are not only grand halls of politics or corporate boardrooms. They can be small offices, social circles, even homes where authenticity has been quietly exiled. Such places may appear polite, even elegant, yet the atmosphere feels strangely hollow, as if every word floats without weight. Steiner taught that truth is not an idea, it is a living spiritual being. Every time truth is spoken, a spark of cosmic order flows into the world. Every time it is twisted or hidden, that living current breaks. Over time, the space where deception thrives becomes energetically brittle, full of dissonance. You can sense it when you enter. The tension behind smiles, the careful choreography of speech, the invisible fog of pretense. It is as though the air itself hesitates before carrying sound, uncertain what is real. Have you ever left a meeting feeling drained without knowing why? Perhaps you were in a place where people spoke from intellect, but not from heart. Words, Steiner said, are sacred tools. When used falsely, they lose their etheric strength and instead bind the speaker to illusion. The result is a vibration that numbs intuition and corrodes trust, not only between people, but within oneself. For when surrounded by dishonesty, we begin to doubt our own inner truth. The danger of such atmospheres is subtle but profound. They teach the soul to divide, to think one thing, feel another, and express something else entirely. Over time, this fracture becomes habitual, and the person loses the inner unity necessary for spiritual growth. The soul, once radiant, becomes like glass fogged from within. Steiner described this as the triumph of the Ahrimanic double, the inner shadow that feeds on fear of truth. Yet he also revealed a way to cleanse these spaces, through courageous authenticity. One honest word, spoken with warmth and humility, can restore order to a room. When someone dares to say, "This feels wrong," or "I don't know, but I want to be truthful," a subtle healing begins. The atmosphere shifts, as though a window opens and stale air escapes. The invisible world responds instantly to sincerity. If you must dwell in such a place, an office, a family system, a social group steeped in masks, become an agent of clarity. Do not fight with anger, but radiate coherence. Speak slowly. Mean what you say. Steiner believed that the spoken word, aligned with heart and deed, carries the rhythm of divine creation itself. Where it is present, falsehood cannot long survive. In time, even the most corrupted atmosphere can be transformed, not through accusation, but through presence. The soul that lives in truth is a lamp that cannot be dimmed. It reveals the shadows simply by existing. The sixth kind of place Steiner drew attention to is where the dead are forgotten. Few modern people realize, he said, that the bond between the living and the dead is not severed by the grave. It is a continuous conversation carried in silence. When this connection fades, when remembrance is lost, when cemeteries become neglected or ancestral homes abandoned, an invisible loneliness begins to haunt both sides of the veil. Such places feel strangely hollow, as if the air itself has been holding its breath for decades. Steiner taught that the souls of the departed remain near the living, nourished not by offerings of objects, but by currents of thought imbued with love. Memory, he said, is a bridge of light across worlds. When this light is extinguished, when no one prays, remembers, or speaks their names, the atmosphere of the place thickens with grief unredeemed. It is not the dead who curse the living, but the living who starve the dead of warmth, leaving behind an energetic vacuum that chills the human heart. Have you ever wandered through an old cemetery where the stones crumble and weeds grow wild? You might feel a sadness deeper than your own. That sadness belongs to the place itself, the echo of stories forgotten, of gratitude never spoken. Or perhaps you've entered a family home where quarrels replaced remembrance, and portraits of ancestors were taken down to make room for new decorations. Something invisible retreats there. The warmth leaves. Steiner explained that when we cut ties with the dead, we also weaken our sense of destiny. For the ancestors live within us as forces of guidance, shaping the stream of our own will. Their unremembered presence becomes restless within the etheric field, clouding clarity and stirring inexplicable anxiety. This is why societies that lose the art of remembrance also lose direction. They walk without roots. But renewal is always possible. To heal these forgotten places, Steiner advised the simplest of rituals: remembrance through love. Light a candle. Speak the names of those who came before you. Think of them not with sorrow, but with gratitude for the thread of life that continues through you. In that moment, the etheric field brightens. The silence becomes gentle instead of cold. The dead feel warmth again, and you feel guidance, a subtle intuition whispering in your thoughts. Even if you do not know your ancestors, you can extend the gesture to the nameless dead, to all souls wandering without remembrance. May you find peace, you can say inwardly, wherever you walk. In doing so, you become a healer of forgotten realms. The earth responds, for every place where love is recalled becomes luminous once more. Steiner reminded his students that human beings are bridges between worlds. When we forget the dead, the bridge crumbles. When we remember them, heaven and earth meet quietly again. There are places in this world that look innocent, even beautiful, yet they drain the life of the soul like a quiet poison. Rudolf Steiner spoke of them not as physical locations alone, but as vibrations, psychic atmospheres where the human spirit becomes numb, where one forgets that life is sacred. He said there are 7 kinds of places to avoid, and one of them, perhaps the most deceptive, is the place of hollow pleasure, where joy is no longer born of truth, but of stimulation. These are the zones of distraction, the endless noise of consumption, where one's inner flame flickers out, not because of evil, but because of exhaustion. When we remain too long in such energy, the astral body, the subtle sheath of emotion and imagination, begins to lose its harmony. We may laugh, dance, or scroll endlessly, but deep inside, a strange coldness spreads. It is the feeling of being alive only on the surface, while something sacred within slowly withers. Steiner warned, when the human being forgets reverence, even pleasure becomes a graveyard. Without reverence, beauty turns artificial, art becomes manipulation, entertainment becomes hypnosis. Have you ever left a place feeling emptier than before you arrived, though you were surrounded by color, light, and sound? That is the sign. The soul has been fed with illusions instead of life. To protect ourselves, Steiner suggested a simple practice. Carry a spark of mindfulness wherever you go. Enter every space as if you were a guest in a temple, even if it is a market, a workplace, a nightclub. The sacred does not disappear. It only waits for the eyes that can still see. Because when you bring awareness, you sanctify the very air around you. And then, no place, not even one of shadow, can poison your soul. In the final vision of Rudolf Steiner's teaching, the true battlefield is not between people, nor between good and evil out in the world. It is within the kingdom of the human soul. Every shadow we meet outside is only a reflection of something that still sleeps or struggles within us. He said, humanity's greatest task is not to remain pure, but to become conscious. The divine does not ask us to be untouched by darkness. It asks us to awaken through it. Only when we face what is unholy with the light of awareness does spirit become real, alive, and personal. Steiner called this the era of Michael, the archangel of spiritual courage. In this age, our weapon is not the sword, but clarity. Every moment we resist fear, every time we choose compassion over judgment, We forge invisible armor. We no longer fight against the dark. We learn to transmute it, as fire turns wood into warmth. The places we were warned to avoid are not merely on the map of Earth. They are on the inner landscape, the desolate regions of the mind where doubt, vanity, and addiction rule. When we purify these spaces within, the outer world begins to shine again. Even a crowded street becomes a cathedral if the eyes of the soul are open. And one day, said Steiner, humanity will no longer need religion to speak of God, because God will be living again in the consciousness of every human being. Every act, even the smallest, will carry the fragrance of the sacred. Every meeting will be a divine encounter in disguise. This is the victory we are walking toward, not over others, but over forgetfulness itself. It is the triumph of awakened awareness, the rebirth of the human soul in light. The real redemption begins when we remember the universe is not outside us. It breathes through us.